First off, I want to welcome everybody to the St. Joseph, our St. Joseph Memorial Park here. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of this park a little bit later. Before I get started though, I want to say a couple of thank yous up front. I want to thank my sister Monique. Monique called me about maybe 5-6 weeks ago, and Monique said, "Do you mind talking to a few people up at the park?" I said, "Absolutely, I got no problem with that." And I'm glad that the few people expanded to quite a few more. The more the merrier. I want to thank Loretta. She's the one behind the camera. Loretta also is very instrumental in helping me with everything that Pauline and I do with respect to Brother Andre. I of course want to thank Pauline, my wife. She's going to be helping me out today. And the St. Joseph Historical Society as well. They're here in full force helping us out. And of course I want to thank everybody here. So, and that's on behalf of the Historical Society, the Brother Andre Committee, and the Lake Huron Catholic Family of Parishes. We'd love to see everybody here. This is a great turnout. I understand most of you guys are from St. Justin's, and I have a lot of family backing me up. My cousin Therese, my cousin Angela around here somewhere, so that's wonderful. So I'm going to give you a few minutes history on myself. My name is Mark Canton. My wife's name is Pauline. I grew up in Detroit, and I moved here when I was about 22 years old, and I will tell you that growing up in Detroit as a kid, you know, I heard the stories about Brother Andre. My dad would talk to us about him, and we heard them all. And growing up in Detroit, it's not something that kind of went over your head. You know, it wasn't, you know, sure, Dad, that's wonderful. You know, he was a good man. He took us to church every Sunday, and it wasn't until I came to Canada, and I'm a firm believer that God puts people in our lives for a reason. So to give you a little bit more of my history, I remember growing up in Detroit. I mean, I don't even know how I ended up in Canada. You know, I mean, I wanted to, at a very young age, I wanted to join a circus. I thought that would be fun. I wanted to join the Navy. That didn't happen. Bit of a regret. I wanted to, even a buddy of mine were down in Detroit once, and we were going to jump on a freighter and sail the 7 seas, and that didn't happen either. And if it wasn't for Monique, my sister here, in fact I didn't even come to Canada back when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, she said, "You know what, you need a girlfriend, you should come to the cottage for the weekend, we'll find you one." And they did. So 34 years later, I am now a Canadian citizen, and I love it up here, and I've got no regrets. So getting back to the man of the hour, Brother Andre. Okay, now I will tell you that as soon as you get to know this guy, you immediately fall in love with him. You know, he was something else. So when I came to Canada, my wife and I took our kids to Montreal for the first time, and I'll tell you, that was my conversion right there and then. I had heard the stories. I had read a little bit about it. I spent my summers up here. I listened to my Uncle Knapp talking about Brother Andre, but it never really hit. You know, and miracles are a tough sell. You know, so when I went to the oratory for the first time and seeing all the crutches, the tens of thousands of crutches, and reading the stories, I thought, this is something else. And I immediately became very devoted to Brother Andre. And as a result of that, my wife and I are on a mission to promote Brother Andre, and we will be doing that. This fall will be our 4th relic tour, major relic tour, and we're coming to your church on November 1st. And we're going to be around the diocese for a couple of weeks. And it's something that, out of all the things that we've done in our lives, it's probably one of the most special things that we've done in our lives is our Brother Andre relic tours. But this is great, so I'm going to talk now a lot more about Brother Andre and less about myself. Brother Andre was born in Quebec, St. Gregoire, Quebec, thank you. I don't know why that slipped my mind. In 1845. Very, very weak when he was born. His parents did not think he was going to make it. They said they brought in the parish priest. He was baptized the very next day because they did not, he was so frail. And that's something that stuck with him his entire life. You're going to be over and you're going to see the statue over there. That's actually a life-size statue of Brother Andre. He was very short, about 5 feet. And he had a tough life growing up, you know. I mean, he was very devoted, and he had a great family life. He had nine brothers and sisters, but he was always that, you know, the weak one, you know. And then to make things worse, they moved around, and Quebec was not, you know, they were a very poor family. They did what they could to get by. So his dad was taking down trees, and at the age of 10, Brother André lost his dad to an accident. A tree fell on him. 2 years later, he would lose his mother to tuberculosis. Before I go on with that, I want to tell you that it's an interesting, you know, on how people pray the rosary and how they learn to pray the rosary. I learned to pray the rosary in my in-laws' house, where it's the speed of light. You know, praying the rosary in that house. Brother André learned to pray the rosary very special way by simply kneeling in front of his mother and praying along her fingers on her beads, and I think that's beautiful. So, anyways, Brother André, after losing his parents, he went to go live with his uncles, and he had a tough way because he was so frail. He just was not good at anything. You know, he was good at something, and I will get to that later, but he was not good at anything manual labor. He tried 36 different trades, from a baker to a shoemaker to a laborer. He tried everything. He ended up moving to the States at a young age, and he worked in the textile mills. He also worked for a logging company. He worked for a variety of jobs down in New England, and he was only down there for about 4 years, and he picked up a little bit of English, kind of enough to get him by. And it was just an epic failure down in the States, so he ended up moving back to Quebec. And it was at this time that he really started to get to know his parish priest, Father André Provencal. Father André Provencal, he saw something special in Brother André, that as soon as you met Brother André, everybody saw that same special thing in him. Well, Father Provencal told him, have you ever considered a religious life? And Brother André, not being educated and not being good at anything manual, he didn't think that there was going to be a fit for him. So Father Provencal wrote a letter to the Holy Cross congregation, and he said, "I'm sending you a saint." And that's the way the letter started. And he went to the Holy Cross, and at first they immediately rejected him, saying he's not educated. There's too many. We just don't have a spot for Brother André, or for Alfred. I'm sorry, I keep calling him Brother André. He didn't become Brother André until he took his vows. So I should have said Alfred. Sorry, guys. You get it now. Anyways, so Alfred, he wasn't sure what was going to happen if it wasn't for the Superior General stepping up and saying, Alfred is a lot of things, and no, he can't do much, but he can pray. And that's good enough for us. So at the age of 20 or so, I think it was, he entered into the Holy Cross, and he'll always say that they showed me the door, and that's where he stayed for 40 years. And there's a lot of truth to that. So they stationed him at the College of Notre Dame College, which is directly across from where the oratory is now. And his job was as simple as this: go and open the door for people, and that was it. So Brother André had a little office, which is still there. You can see it today. And he would look out this little skinny window and watch for people to walk up the lane, and he would simply go to the door, open the door for them, and that was it. And when you greet people, you'd say, "Bonjour, comment ça va?" And people would say, "Ça va bien?" Or they might say, "Comme ci, comme ça." And if they said "Comme ci, comme ça," he would ask them, "Well, what's wrong? What can we?" And they would tell him their ailments, right? And he would say to them, "You should go pray to Saint Joseph, and I will pray along with you." And things started happening, and there's no explanation for it, but people started getting cured. People were walking away from there feeling better. And before you knew it, the news spread, and there started to be more people going to the college, and more people going up that lane, and more people going up that walkway, and more people that he would say the same thing. He would go and greet him at the door and say, "How are you today?" "Well, maybe not so good, Brother André," And then he would pray with them. And that line started to grow to a point. And you got to remember that College Notre Dame is a private school, and people paid a lot of money for their kids to go to school there. So eventually the parents started saying, hey, you know, all these people are coming up, they're sick, you know, they have issues, can you not do something about that? So the college, recognizing it, said, you know what, Brother Andre, during the day you open the door, and afterwards you can go across the street to the trolley station, and for those of you going to the oratory this fall, that trolley station still exists. Well, that became overrun. So then Brother Andre, looking up that mountain, thought, you know what, wouldn't it be nice to have a little oratory, a little chapel dedicated to St. Joseph? So Brother Andre would actually go and he would take a handful of medals, St. Joseph medals, and he'd plant them on that mountain. And he would pray that one day he could have a chapel up there. So another job that Brother Andre had back at the school was cutting hair. So he used to be able to charge a nickel per haircut, and he'd put it in a jar. So he finally petitioned the Holy Cross, and he said, you know what, can we buy that piece of land? And at first they were very skeptical about it, but then he had saved every nickel he had, and they bought that little mountain. They bought that piece of land, and he went up there with a group of friends, and they built a very, very primitive chapel. And as time went on, you know, the numbers grew, and they kept coming. So the oratory, or the chapel, had to be expanded, you know, to hold 100 people. Then it got expanded again to hold a couple hundred people. And it wasn't until about 1912 or so that they got the idea that they were actually going to build a full-size church. So what do you got there for me? So anyways, I'm going to say that it's probably around 1906, 1908 that my great-grandfather Narcisse is the one, I don't want to get into that story because we are in a timeline here, but Narcisse is the guy he founded St. Joseph. He wanted to put a seaway through here. There's a big story to that. Well, anyways, if you're doing an enterprise like that, he had an office in Montreal, and my grandfather also believed in the very best of education for his kids. So Narcisse and Josephine and his 10 kids were living in Montreal at the time. And of course they were living in what they call NDG, which is a neighborhood that's right around the oratory. So they got to hear about Brother Andre. So one day Narcisse, he goes up and he meets with Brother Andre. And Brother Andre, you know, he looks at this little primitive chapel, and Brother Andre tells him, I'm building a chapel here dedicated to St. Joseph. And Narcisse says, well, I'm going to build a city dedicated to St. Joseph. And they immediately became friends. And as I was saying before, Brother Andre was that type of guy. You know, you would immediately just want to help this guy out as much as possible. He was a very approachable guy. So this is, and all these little things are going to be behind us for you guys to look at afterwards, but this is a letter, and one of Narcisse's sons was sick. It was, his name was Oliver, and this is a letter dated 1910, and this is where Brother Andre, this is when we first find out about Brother Andre's initial methods of curing, okay? It was, I always say that Brother Andre did not invent the idea of St. Joseph oil and a medal, but he certainly perfected it. It's a very old French custom. So anyways, this is a letter that was written to the family, and that's where he mentions, you know, use the oil of St. Joseph, use the medal, pray to St. Joseph, and put all your faith in St. Joseph, and he'll be there for you. So anyways, now we're around 1913, and I always talk about this a little bit because a lot of people think about the medal and the oil and having to be right with Brother Andre. So what I'm going to show you now is what I like to call a long-distance miracle. So my grandmother Josephine, they were back in St. Joseph for some reason or another, and she comes down with gallstones. Very serious issues, and they transfer her to St. Joseph Hospital. Brother Andre is a nervous wreck about it, or I'm sorry, Narcisse is a nervous wreck about it, and he sends a telegram to Brother Andre. He sends a telegram to his son saying, go see Brother Andre, tell Brother Andre that your mother is very sick. What do we do? So Brother Andre sends a telegram back to Narcisse saying, use the oil, rub, it's in French so I struggle a little bit, rub, for a long time. Long time. Anyways, a lot of praying. And it's beautiful because it worked. And she overcame her illness, and out of the hospital she came. And there's a beautiful letter that Narcisse wrote to his wife, saying, "My sweetheart, you'll be delighted to know that Brother André is on the case." I'm not going to go into the whole letter, because it's very long. So anyways, we're going to go on with the story. So anyways, as I was telling you before, the crowds we're talking 1,000 people going up that mountain a day now. They recognize that Brother André, they're not going to give him any rest at all. He's working 7 days a week. They're going at all hours of night. The only way for Brother André to get any rest at all is going to be to get away from Montreal. So Narcisse decides what a great idea it would be for him to come for a visit. And that is really where the Cantons and the families around here, the stories really begin with with Brother André. So Brother André petitioned the Holy Cross to allow Narcisse petitions the Holy Cross to allow Brother André to come to St. Joseph for a visit. And I imagine that took a little doing, but it was nice. So he sends a letter, and this is where I take a break and I let Pauline read a little bit about the letter that... So Narcisse writes a letter to his son, Napoleon. I'll be right back with you.
And he's a very great writer, and he says, "Our good Brother André, by the grace of God, is crowning us with the good, and your mother with the good intentions of his visit with your children, and how blessed we are with his saintly visit." And then he goes on to describe how he wants Brother André to be treated when he comes. He says he's a very saintly man, he's a very holy man. This is what you're going to feed him. You're going to feed him our finest beef. You're going to find our great fruits of apples and pears. Maybe you could find some grapefruit and some grapes. He said he's going to want to go to church here up at St. Peter's Church many times a day. Take him for walks. So that he may walk down by the beaches and see our glorious beaches. But he said, be careful who visits him. He said, do not let people, heckle him. Be careful about who he meets and stuff like that. Am I too far away? Sorry. Yeah, he's going to, but at the same time, he's going to want to meet people and he's going to want to visit people. And just been blessed with these glorious visits.
Good job. So anyways, and when he's here, it's interesting, I just can't imagine what it would be like to hang out with Brother André. And I've heard the stories, but now these are stories that my grandparents have told us. And they've told, look around, I see the Jeffreys, and I see the Laportes, and I see everybody around here, and they can tell you the same story that they've all heard stories. And they've all, especially some of the older ones, have heard stories about direct visits with Brother André. I just can't imagine how much fun it would have been. Now, I've heard the stories, and I could tell you that I just love every one of them. So anyways, I want to talk now. So Brother André comes for a visit here, and you're probably wondering what I'm doing with all this stuff, and I'm going to explain that. Brother André comes for a visit here. Can you hold the oil for me? Thanks. And he's staying in the yellow brick house, which is just past the gully here to the north. And he's sitting there having dinner with my grandparents, Valerie and Napoleon. And he's looking across here. Now, I want to paint real quickly a picture of what it was like in 1917 in St. Joseph. What you see here is very much different than what it was, okay? So bear with me. If you can imagine, just to the south here was the Balmoral Hotel. It was a 3-story monstrosity, massive building, factory buildings all the way for as far as the eye can see to the lake, houses all as far as the eye can see to the north, and I'll tell you all about what happened, all that stuff, a long time from now, not right now. And there was actually a factory building standing right where we are right now. Brother André says, Napoleon, you must find a spot for St. Joseph here. You must find somewhere for him. He goes, come on, let's go do that. So Brother André, they come out of the yellow brick house, they go into the old organ factory, and he picks up, sorry about that, he picks up this sledgehammer, And when I say that, I mean that. He didn't pick up a sledgehammer. This is the sledgehammer that Brother André used. It's been in the family for the last 100 years, 106 years or so. And he comes over here with Napoleon, and he drove a stake, a piece of half-inch iron pipe, right back where you see that statue of St. Joseph. And he says, this is the spot you're going to save for St. Joseph. You guys need St. Joseph in this town. This is his spot. Now, I imagine my grandfather probably said, yeah, how about behind the house somewhere, or maybe, up at the church. And Brother André said, no, right here. And when Brother André asked you for something like that, I don't think you could deny him. So that's something that happened, and it took a long time coming. My grandfather worked his entire life, but it was a hard thing to do to come up with funds and things like that to actually find a proper statue. But this park at that time was then dedicated as the Brother André lot. St. Joseph was divided into probably about 1,000 different lots, and this became known as lot number 1, Brother André. So during the time of his visits here in St. Joseph, a lot of miracles happened. There's too many to even mention, but I have asked Pauline to grab the book over there from the church book. And a lot of things happened here. So a couple of the different miracles that happened right here in St. Joseph. I'm going to try and recite some while she's grabbing them, because I thought it'd be of interest to you to know some of the things. I'm going to hold it. Yep.
So Mrs. Edward Denemy was suffering from a running sore in her mouth caused by a bad tooth. This sore had been present for 6 or 7 years. Edward Corvo and his mother, Matilda, took Mrs. Denemy to see Brother André, and after her visit she was completely cured and the sore never returned. Josiah Bedard walked with crutches. He went to visit Brother André, who told him that he no longer needed his crutches. And after having a chat with Brother André, when Josiah was about to leave, he leaned over to get his crutches, and Brother André told him again that he didn't need them. Josiah was able to walk without crutches, but he did so in a slightly bent over position. Josiah worked at the Drysdale store, just up the road. Oh, Edward Denemy. Edward Denemy had asthma, which made it difficult for him to work on his farm and support his family of 11. His daughter Priscilla remembers her father as a good and hard worker. His condition was treated by inhaling an asthma powder from a tin dish that looked like a lampshade. Her father would often say, "If I only had my breathing." Priscilla's uncle from Michigan drove Edward to the oratory in Montreal, where they met with Brother André in the little caboose. While placing one hand on Edward's head and one on his chest, Brother André explained that while Edward would not ever be completely healed, he'd be able to sleep at night, work on his farm, and support his family. And from that day forward, Edward no longer needed to use the asthma powder to breathe. And that was actually from Priscilla Brandt when she was still alive here in town. She remembers that.
So it gives you a small sampling, and these books are up there, so please enjoy them. And Brother André, he would be very straightforward with you. A lot of people went up to him for a lot of different things, and he would tell you straight up. He would tell you, you know what, I can't cure you, but I will help you to understand, we're going to pray to St. Joseph so that you have the grace to bear your cross. And maybe that was, I know that they'll go on to say that whether he cured you or not, you always walked away from Brother André feeling a lot better. So the 1917 visit, it kind of went on. It was nice. It was for a couple of weeks here. He went back to Montreal. My Uncle Joe Canton, who lived here in St. Joseph, but he also lived in Montreal for a while. He was probably one of the closer ones to Brother André that I know of. I know Napoleon was always the fellow who had him in his house here in St. Joseph, but with Joe, he was always in Montreal. So Joe had a Model A, and Joe would go up to the oratory, Model T, a Model T car, a Ford Model T, and he would go up several times a week, pick up Brother André, take him to visit the sick. and that was something that you just dedicated your time to do, just not unlike what Pauline and I do. But he wanted to spend that much time with them. So Uncle Joe one night had gone out and he had bought a big statue of St. Joseph, about yay tall, nice statue of St. Joseph. And he goes up and he goes to pick up Brother André, and Brother André comes out and he goes, "Oh, let me put that in the back seat for you." Brother André says, "No, I'll hold St. Joseph for you." So they drove around that night visiting the sick with that statue. And then around midnight, they got back after visiting the sick, and it was wintertime in Montreal, and anybody who's been to Montreal in the winter times know that that's no picnic. And they climbed those stairs to the crypt church on solid ice. And when they got up to the top, Brother André looked at Joe and says, "Why don't you come on in, we're going to go make the way of the cross." And Uncle Joe said, "Brother André, you're tired, go to bed. This is enough, right? We've been out all night. You're good. You've done enough today. Go to bed." And it was Brother André said to him, "Joseph, it's when we do things tired that we gain the most merit." And that's on the back of, and you'll probably pick up one of those prayer cards, hopefully you do afterwards. You'll notice that that's on the back of one of the prayer cards Pauline and I put together, because that really is, it does kind of give you, it really paints a good character of what Brother André was all about. I mean, this is a guy who could barely get down a meal, but he found enough energy to pray with just about everybody he came in contact with. So, very special. I'm holding this bottle of oil for a reason. This is the bottle of oil that Brother André gave to the family. There's still oil in it, but I gotta assume that we used it and it's been refilled a few times. But it's kind of cool. So that's one of the relics that we keep. So they always kept in good contact with Brother André over the years. I'm trying to recite some of these stories that I know of. And, oh, Pauline, you got the crucifix? Thanks. So you'll notice some of the relics behind us here, and also Pauline and I framed just about everything we have as far as documents, and that's what the whole table's about. So I hope everybody gets a chance to walk around that and take a look. I think we're going to bring this stuff out when we go out anyways on the major reliquary tour, so you'll be able to see it again one day. Another story, Brother André was also very good friends with my Uncle John and my Aunt Josephine. I'll get that picture of the Oratory magazine with André on the front. So a couple of the other stories I want to share with you is my cousin Georgette, and I think there's a lot of people from this area that remember Georgette. Beautiful woman, a lot of fun to be around, very and a great storyteller. And she remembers as a kid a couple of things that I thought were really cool that she remembered. One is she remembered sitting on Brother André's knee and how much fun he was. He was always like that fun uncle, the guy who was going to tease or tell you a joke or something like that. Brother André, I always tell the kids when I go into schools or I talk in schools, I always tell kids he was a very approachable man. He was not the type of guy that you were to be afraid of or anything like that. He was a lot of fun to be around. That was Brother André. So this was the cover of a magazine that the Oratory put out once, and that's actually André Woodcock there kicking the ball and Brother André chasing him around. Brother André Woodcock, when he was born, my Uncle Joe took him over to the Oratory and he placed him in Brother André's arms, and Brother André said, "I'm going to claim this boy as my own." And he actually was André's godfather. Brother André was André's godfather, which I thought was kind of cool. When you're going to the Oratory, I know some of you going to the Oratory, they were very close with him. They spent lots of nights in that little chapel with him, and they had a lot of good memories of him coming and spending time with them with the family. And then you'll notice on there as well, I've got some pictures as well of Brother André. This is a cute story about his 1922 visit. So he came back. There is a picture. This is the picture. And we officially recognize that Brother André was in St. Joseph twice. But this particular picture here, there was always a legend that he was here in 1920 as well. This particular picture is actually the proof of that, because it shows my Uncle Knapp there, and that would have been Uncle Knapp at 1 year old, and that makes about sense that he was here in 1920. What's interesting about the 1922 visit is Brother André came down, he was here, and my grandfather, due to the businesses that were coming in around here, he had two great big steam engine cars. And some of you guys might remember him, especially the old timer there. Remember the steam engine car. And so my grandfather and Brother André were always joking around with each other. And he said to him, he says, have you ever driven an automobile, Brother André? And Brother André says, no, of course not. I've never driven an automobile. He goes, well, today's your lucky day. So they fired up the old steamer, the old white steamer, and he let Brother André take the wheel. And they went around the corner, and Brother André immediately put it in a ditch. And so I always tell people that my grandfather was the one who gave Brother André his driving lessons. So we had a lot of fun with that. My grandfather was always left in St. Joseph to take care of all the businesses here, the buildings, everything that was going on in St. Joseph. Napoleon was the keeper of St. Joseph. But he did get to Montreal once in a while. The last time that my grandfather seen Brother André alive was in June 24th of 1936. And he went to go see Brother André. Brother André was in the hospital, and he wasn't feeling very good. But Brother André used to weave his own cords for his crucifix. He used to hang a crucifix on the side of his cassock. And he was weaving this one, and my grandfather went into him and he said, boy, that's a big job you got going on there. And Brother André looked at him and he says, I want you to finish this one, Brother André, or Napoleon. So he presented this crucifix to him, and the cord used to be quite a bit longer, but as people in the area needed it, my grandfather would cut off little pieces of cord, and that's why it's so short now. So we don't cut that off anymore. But it was important to spread the word, and the Cantons and everybody around here have always promoted Brother André. You know, and I look at his visits here, just his couple of visits that he had here, and what impact it had on this community is outstanding. So, Brother André lived a very good life. He saw the crypt church to its completion. He saw the starting of the basilica. He never saw the roof go on it. And during the Great Depression, everything kind of came to a halt at the oratory. There was no funds to complete the basilica. They kind of sent Brother André out on a road trip where he would go to New York and meet with the Rockefellers. He'd go everywhere else. You know, and he kind of drummed up funds to help keep the oratory going. The family continued to keep in touch with him, visit with him. And I'll talk a little bit about his funeral, not a whole lot. Drink of water. Anyways, he did a lot of good, and that's for sure. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of stories in Montreal, and every time we go to Montreal, we seem to hear a new, different story. So, okay, so we're talking about the funeral, and some of the things that are up here. I'll let Pauline talk a little bit for a second. Talk about.
So Mark's great uncle John Woodcock was in Montreal for the funeral, and he has a very detailed written documentation back there, 6-7 pages of his description of what's happening, the funeral events. You're back, and they're back there, and I'm just gonna let.
Okay, I just want you to know this is not our day job. All right, I'm a carpenter. Pauline does something else. Okay, yeah, she's cute. That's right. Anyways, really cute. So, Uncle John did the honor. My grandfather could not make it, and we have a handwritten account back there. And my Uncle John goes on to say, they gave notification. Brother André eventually, at the age of 91, passed away. Montreal was devastated. The Brothers of the Holy Cross, the Fathers of the Holy Cross, were devastated. My Uncle John, they used to go to the oratory for Mass every Sunday. He wrote to him, he says, we just can't believe this. We just went to Mass with Brother André on Christmas Eve, and he died January 6th of 1937. Some interesting stories about the funeral. Georgette visited, she went to the funeral several times, and there was always talk about, you know, people going up, and they went through, I forgot how many per minute, 60 per minute, I believe. They had to get over 1 million people through the line in the course of 2 days. And she said that she remembers going up to the casket of seeing Brother André, and everybody was bringing their rosary beads and rubbing them across his feet, because that was the only thing you could do was just rub your rosary beads there. And they said they had rubbed the tips of his socks right off. That was her most vivid memory of the funeral. Now, as I was explaining to you a little bit, and I want to explain a few things here, Uncle Joe as well, we had the Cantons were lucky enough to have special funeral passes that would get you in the door maybe a little bit better, a little bit quicker, who knows. My Uncle Joe went up to the casket, and I know that everybody can kind of somewhat understand this, or maybe it's just me, and it could be just me, but you go up to a casket and you see your friend in the casket, and maybe his head's not sitting quite right, and even though you know that he's passed away, you still want him to be comfortable, So Uncle Joe went up there, and he seen his head was a little bit off, and he decided that he was going to go up to the casket and he was going to fix that. He wanted him to straighten out Brother André, and of course the RCMP immediately stopped him, shoot him away, and they're lucky they didn't throw him out the side of the oratory window, but they didn't. So he actually went back to go see Father Clement. Father Clement was second in charge there, and Father Clement actually wrote him a permission card, and the permission card actually says, it's this one, it said it's permission for Mr. Joseph Canton to adjust the cushion that supports the head of Brother André. So he actually got a pass to go up and actually fix his head. I thought that was a cute story about the funeral. Another one too is Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe was always so well known at the oratory because, again, he was taking him out 3 times a week or so to visit the sick. So everybody at the oratory knew Uncle Joe. So one night they decide Uncle Joe was chosen to guard the body of Brother André overnight. So here he is, he's sitting in a room, and he's sitting with Brother André, and imagine even that was pleasant. I wouldn't mind doing that. Sometimes I find myself at the oratory. My wife and I go there about 4 times a year, and that is probably aside from getting a new hat, that's probably my second thing that I like to do the most. It should be the first. And I like to go in and for the people who are going to the oratory this fall, spend some time with Brother André, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You put your hand on the tomb. It's very special, and sometimes I do the talking, and sometimes I wait and I let him do the talking. And either way, I walk out of that tomb feeling that I feel pretty good about it. So Uncle Joe one night is guarding the body of Brother André, and all these dignitaries come in, all these people, and he's thinking, uh-oh, 1 against 50, what am I going to do, right? Well, he's a Canton, he'll figure it out. So they came in and they had a letter, and they actually wrote a farewell letter, and on this letter is the signatures of all Brother André's closest friends. Now it goes on, the letter, I'm not going to read the whole thing because I don't want to run out of time, but it goes on to say, you've helped us so much in life, you've cried with us, you've laughed with us, you've joked with us, you are our friend, you are our brother, and eventually that would get extended and you are our saint. So that's a very special, nice note about the funeral. So we're good on that one.
Yeah. The English translation is it.
So the English translation is right here. What's interesting about that is Uncle Joe went out that night. I don't know where he went. I don't know if they have a Kinko's or whatever. But he went out that night with that signed document, and he actually took a Xerox copy of it. And then he took that Xerox copy and he mailed it back to St. Joseph for safekeeping with Napoleon. And it wasn't until Pauline and I actually showed up at the oratory with the Xerox copy that their jaws dropped, and they said, well, where did you get that? And I said, well, we've had this in the family for the last 75 years. And they pulled out, and it was like me looking at the Declaration of Independence, they actually pulled out the original copy, and they said, this was pulled out when he was beatified. They opened the coffin during the beatification process, and that's when they actually was the first time that the oratory knew that this existed. So it was very interesting to see that. So as life went on, after Brother André had passed away, Uncle Joe decided it would be a good idea, and you're going to see the statue up at the church when you go. Uncle Joe decided it would be a good idea to have a statue carved of Brother André. And it took him a long time, and he had a friend, an artist friend, come up with this idea. And what happened with that is he wanted to donate it to the oratory. He wanted to be in the oratory. At the time, the people of the oratory said no thank you to that. So he actually had it shipped down to St. Joseph, and that's the story of the statue down at the church. The statue you see here, and I want to talk about this so I don't forget about it. The statue you see here, again, that was Brother André's choice to have that statue there. My grandfather did not see that happen in his life, but in 1972, his son, Napoleon Edward, and his good friend, Tony Laporte, they were offered this statue from the seminary in St. Peter's Cemetery in London. So that's when that statue came to realization here. The statue of Brother André is another story, and that has to happen with my dad, John Paul. He always, and again, Tony Laporte, those two guys were the very best of friends, and they were always cooking up something. So they wanted to have a statue of Brother André right here in the park. So it was my dad and Tony Laporte that commissioned Frank Moore to do the life-size statue that you see there of Brother André. So again, this is the Brother André lot. Now I'm going to, I know we talked for a long time here, and I do want to tell you, I want to go back to where I told you that God puts people in your life for a reason. God certainly put Pauline in my life for a reason, I know that. What's interesting to note is that although Brother André was good friends with the Cantons, Brother André was also good friends with Maxim Denemy, who is Pauline's grandfather. So it's interesting to see that we ended up together, you know. So, but I do think that that's the truth, and I want to tell you our little story about how we came to where we are today. And I think this is a very cute story. And how are we doing for time? We're good? Okay, so I want to tell you the story because I think it's worth telling. So again, growing up in Detroit, I can't say that I was the most practicing Catholic, but I did like going to church and holding her hand for an hour, so I actually became very devoted. So anyways, and going to the oratory is my true conversion story, because that's where I really realized that yeah, you know, I certainly didn't get the gift, but Brother André sure did. You know, and to be able to talk to St. Joseph and actually get St. Joseph to respond like he did for him, well, that is a miracle. So here's my story about people getting put into your life at a certain time, and I'm all done talking about Pauline now, so it's not going to get mushy anymore. Good friend of ours, Joan Carson, calls us up one night. She owns Brentwood on the beach right down the street. And she says, Mark and Pauline, we have two nuns here, and they're from the Holy Cross. Isn't that the same order as Brother André? And I said, yes, it is. And she says, would you like to come and have dinner with them? And I said, sure, that would be lovely, right? So nobody's going to miss a dinner at Brentwood, right? So anyways, we go down to Brentwood, and here's these two sisters, and Sister Henriette and Sister Louise. And I could tell you that meeting Sister Henriette for sure is just like meeting Brother André. Little short lady, big smile the size of Texas on her face, but stern, you know, mighty little woman. So anyways, at that time, Pauline and I had an exhibit up in Goderich, and as part of our exhibit of Innovation Village, or I'm sorry, Innovation is what the job I'm building, Innovation Huron, was a small little display that I made dedicated to Saint André, to Brother André. At that time, he was beatified, not canonized. So anyways, we say, you know what, we got a little exhibit going, would you like to go see it? We make a point to go see it with them. We bring up the little sisters, and they go and they're taking, and you know, do you remember back in the day you had the little cardboard cameras? You know, remember the disposable ones? Yeah. So here's Sister Louise, you know, and just the cutest little sister you want to meet, and she's taking all these pictures. And they get back to Montreal. About 2 weeks later, we get a call from Sister Henriette. I think it was an email from Sister Henriette saying, we tried to develop our pictures. Can you go retake them for us? You know, and send them to us. It's important. She didn't say why. She said it was important. I said, sure, we will. Well, I procrastinated, and we didn't do anything with that. So about 2 weeks later, we get another email. She says, how are you coming along with those pictures, Mark? And I could just see her face when she's writing this email thinking, uh-oh. So I thought, all right, Pauline, we better go up there. So no, I didn't do that actually. I actually emailed her back, and exact words I say, don't worry, the Cantons are working on it. About 3 days later, I got an email from Rome, from the vice postulator, Mario LaChapelle, saying, well, God bless the Cantons for working on it. And I felt about that big. So Pauline and I rushed. I sped, okay? I sped to Goderich, and I took those pictures. Then we went home and we spent the entire weekend and we wrote out the entire history of Brother Andre's visits here, which is in a book over there as well. Then we painstakingly with our kids, and they loved us for it, put together these 20 binders, and we took those to Montreal that next weekend. Pauline and I, we went and met with Sister Henriette. We apologized, and she says, well, come on, we're going for a ride. And she took us right to the oratory. And she had the editor of the magazine there. She had the archivist there. She had Father Grew there. Anyways, we did all that, and that's wonderful. And we thought, okay, that's off my plate. So we went back home, and we thought, well, that's that. You know, that's good. I feel better. Do you? So we did. And anyways, about 2 weeks later, is that what I think it is? Yep, that's it. Okay, about 2 weeks later, Natalie calls us up. She's the editor of the magazine. She goes, I read your story. I think we should come down to St. Joseph and we should read a little bit more. This all plays into my God puts people into your life for a reason. Natalie comes down with Jean-Francois. They meet my dad, which was a real treat. They have a lot of dialogue about a lot of things that probably shouldn't talk to people about, but that's okay, they did. And then we took them to the same exhibit. They did a whole bunch of pictures. They came back. And about 2 weeks later, they say, hey, I need your permission if we can do this. And Pauline and I actually made the cover of the Oratory magazine, which was pretty cool. So I always refer to Pauline as my Miss July now. So anyways, we didn't think much of it. But then we get another email from Sister Henriette, and she goes, can you keep a secret? And I lied, and I say, of course I can. And she says, in about 2 to 3 weeks, the Holy Father is going to announce the canonization of Brother André. And I said, no kidding. So of course I did keep that secret for all of about 30 seconds. And I immediately drove to see my father. And I said, guess what, Dad? You've been praying for this for how many years now? 75 years? They're going to make Brother André a saint. I can't say out loud what my dad said in response to that. But anyways, he wasn't completely convinced. But I said, hey, shh, don't tell a soul. This is a secret. Wait till the Holy Father announces it. Well, I was doing the Berserk rest home at the time, and I remember my dad calling me up the morning that the Holy Father was supposed to announce it, saying, well, you better not have been lying to me, buddy, because I told all my friends. So anyways, and I'm sure Tony was one of those guys that he told. So nonetheless, the Holy Father announces it. I breathed a big sigh of relief. And I told my dad that if they ever make Brother André a saint, I will go there on behalf of the Cantons, and Pauline and I will indeed attend the canonization. He thought I was joking, so we booked 7 tickets, took our 5 teenagers there with us. That was a lot of fun. But before I did there, I thought, you know what? I'm going to write a letter. So I wrote a letter to the Holy Father, and I said, hey, thanks for doing this for me. This is wonderful. What an honor you bestowed on Brother André. I'm going to be in town. Do you mind if I swing by? I want to thank you in person. That was kind of funny. Anyways, the Holy Father did not respond personally, but he had his secretary respond back to me telling me that the Holy Father's busy. I don't know, I think he was making excuses. But that he couldn't meet with me that day, but swing by and we will give you tickets to the Mass. Well, tickets were free anyways, but that doesn't matter. It was cool. I got to go through the big guards with the big funny hats on and the funny yellow suits, and that was kind of cool. So anyways, I had sent a copy of our magazine to the Vatican with my letter to the Holy Father. And I thought, well, that's, I don't know, what happens to that stuff? I imagine they file it, whatever. So I go there, and Pauline and I finally make it to Rome, which was a treat with 5 teenagers, and we're there. And Pauline is waiting in line at the Vatican, and I say, you know what, I could use a coffee. I'm going to go get us a coffee. So my son Joe and I go marching down one of these streets, and we go to find a coffee. And I'm telling him my son Joe, something about Brother Andre, and this guy in front of me, he's walking, he's got this big cassock on, he's marching down the street, he's got a whole entourage of people. He turns around and he looks at me and he says, I can't believe the Cantons are in Rome. And I looked at him and I said, I can't believe you know who I am. And he said, I just read your magazine last night at the Vatican. I said, well, that's kind of cool. They didn't throw it out. So, anyways, he says, I want you to come to St. Andreas. Tonight we're having a vigil mass. Didn't say anything else. Pauline's in her running shoes. So we hoofed her down to St. Andreas. And we walk in to the back doors. And they look and they say, oh, we can start. The Cantons are here. Well, anybody who knows the Cantons know that we come in probably about 2 minutes late. When Father doesn't notice, but we do. Anyways, he's too polite, he doesn't say anything. So anyways, they march us to the back room, they hand us a couple candles and say, there you go, lead the pack. So Pauline and I actually were honored, and I mean honored, to carry the vigil candles in the for the vigil mass. So that was kind of cool. And it was like the paparazzi there, and I remember Pauline had like one of those super candles that had a torch on it about this high, and my candle was like, ooh, 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 one of those ones that wanted to blow out, but it made it, and I did make it. Our trip to Rome was amazing. It was a lot of fun, but again, it's just amazing how one little turn in your life can turn into so many different things. I remember getting emails saying, well, I guess you really did go to Rome, we've seen you on TV. So that was kind of cool. But then we come back, and after Rome, it was interesting. We went to the celebration mass in Montreal. They asked us to come to that, and we took a couple of friends of ours. And this one isn't near as sensational as the other one, but a friend of mine, we're walking through around the stations, or the stations across, the outside stations, and he keeps peeking over the edge. And I finally said to him, I said, Pete, what's the matter with you? What are you looking for? He goes, well, you know, the Prime Minister is going to come today. He goes, I want to see if I can see the motorcade. So I looked at it, just joking around. I said, you know what, Pete? Let's go meet the guy. So we walked down, and I can't even make this up. So I either have to go with my thought that God puts people in your life for a reason, or I am indeed Forrest Gump. I haven't figured that out yet. So I go down to we walk into the crypt church, and lo and behold, Father Gru looks across from the crypt church. He goes, ah, Monsieur Canté, Monsieur Harpé, Monsieur Canté, Monsieur Harpé, good friends of Frère André, Monsieur Harpé, Prime Minister. Woo-hoo. It was actually kind of fun to meet him. It wasn't so much for Pauline, because it wasn't her thing. So this is something that we've been doing and then we got back to Canada, this our side of town here. And another person, again, who was put in my life for a reason was Father Graham Keep. Father Graham Keep, and I bet you just about everybody in this park remembers him or has met him in the years, over the years. Father Graham Keep is very charismatic. That's a great word, charismatic. And he said, Mark, Pauline, I want you to bring the major reliquary. And I looked at him and I thought, okay, well, what's one of those? And he says, well, every time you become a saint, if the saints all have a major reliquary, I want you to ask for the major reliquary. Pauline and I were actually the first major reliquary tour in 2011, right? And it was the first time that the major reliquary went out of the oratory. It was a massive success. And I'll tell you, I can't even tell you what draws us to it, but in 2013 we felt called, we did it again. In 2017 we had a 100-year anniversary here, called again. This year, 2022, we thought, you know what, let's do it again. It's a great way for us to get the story of Brother Andre out there for people to enjoy. Again, I can't say just how much I love this guy. He's awesome. Brother Andre, he's now become a major part of my life, you know, and that's how I think of him. He's a friend. He's a brother, and he's now our saint. Have I missed anything? Okay, good. Does anybody have any questions for me? And if not, how are we doing for time, Loretta?
Good, we're right on time.
You want to come up and talk to me, or ask Monique and she'll tell you. If you ask Monique, she'll run up and tell me. She's good that way. Very encouraging to see young people asking me questions. And thanks for all you older people for not heckling me. Yeah, I know you will. But we have witnessed it. Now I want to talk to you a little bit. Pauline, you want to talk about the votive stuff and the canes that still continue to come?
Oh. Down the hall at St. Joseph's Oratory, in the different offices, they've got one of the offices called Ex Voto. Now, when people receive miracles through the intercession of Brother André, for instance, you no longer need your cane, or you no longer, this saved you, they will send in a thank you. And so you will commonly walk down that hall and you'll see canes hanging still on their door today with little notes saying, in thanksgiving, I no longer need this, and all for the blessings of Saint Brother André. So ex votos and miracles still happen today, and I want everyone to keep praying because miracles still do happen today.
So Miguel, thank you for your question, or actually to let us know. Miguel goes to Saint Frere André School. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that is the French immersion school, Miguel. Yeah, and that is actually it's been around for a long time, that school. So welcome to any students that we have from Saint Frere André, and again, it's very encouraging to see the young people here. So in London, I don't know. Pauline's been there before. I have not. So yeah, it's awesome. And then we went to St. André Bessette Secondary School, which was just opened back in 2017, I think it was. 2017, we went to St. André Bessette Secondary School, and I'll tell you, one of the things I enjoyed the most is they asked me to go around to the different classrooms, and which was a lot easier in talking to, it was 20, 30 people in there, 20, 30 kids. And it was very interesting for me to go in and tell them the stories, and tell them how approachable and what a great saint they have, as their school. And then they actually picked the mascot as Bulldogs, the St. André Bessette Bulldogs as their mascot. And I told them, I said, that's very fitting because that is the best way to really describe Brother André, as he was a little bulldog, eh? So I think that's all I have. Yep, so at this time, I think, Father Vince, are you going to lead the prayer and the lighting of the candles? Do you want to say something on this thing first? It works really good. Are you shy?
Not shy, I'm just not sure what I need to say. So over by the St. Joseph statue, if you'll just come and join us over there. We're going to light 2 candles. Monique will walk you through a little bit of that as to what those candles represent. We'll say a little prayer. I have a major reliquary of the a true relic of St. André. We're going to take time to bless